to actually our very first episode of Inside Embedded. And this is a podcast that we decided to do as part of the amBaaSsador reach out. And Steve and I, there's some favorite people we have in the industry, one of which is going to be our guest here today that we'll chat with you a little bit about. But before we get started, my name is Stacy Bishop. I'm joined here by my partner in business, crime, and matrimony, I suppose, all of those things, Mr. Steve Bishop. And our special guest is a lady that I have come to know a little bit more just over the past couple of months, but one of my favorites. Just a cool person all around, a good human being, and quite a force when it comes to the regulatory environment and BaaS banks and what you and your team can do out there for BaaS banks. Hint, not just for BaaS banks though, also some new exciting developments for the community's banking space. Who is this person, you ask? Glad you did. It's Natasha Vernier, a CEO, co-founder of Cable. And if you haven't heard of Cable, that is something that you will be not able to say for very long, especially after listening to this episode and just paying attention to this space in general. So why don't we actually start there, Tosh? I know we're going to pick your brain from a regulatory and compliance point of view, but why don't we start with Cable? What is Cable? What do you all serve? How do you serve banks that you work with and credit unions?
Hi, Stacey and Steve. Thank you so much for having me. What a lovely introduction. It's been great working with Steve, getting to know you a little bit better, Stacey, and very excited for what you're building at amBaaSsador. And I do love the name.
Thank you.
So at Cable, what we do is we automate the testing of different regulatory frameworks for banks. So banks have to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act, with regulations like Reg E, Reg B, Reg C, UDAP, whatever it might be. And what we do at Cable is we automatically test a bank's compliance with those regulations across 100% of their customer base and transactions. No more dip sampling, no more walking into an exam not knowing if the regulators might find an issue that was lurking under the covers that you did not know about. You know about everything well before an exam or an audit and have the opportunity to remediate it, which gives you a huge confidence boost walking into that exam.
Well, I love this.
So,
Go ahead, Steve.
she commented on the amBaaSsador name, and I have a very critical question for you. So when I think of Cable, I either think of TV or little wires that are wound together to create a strong like cable, if you will. I don't think of tech companies. Can you give us some insight into the history of the Cable name?
Sure. The kind of official line is that we're building all of the cables, that layer of cabling that underpins the infrastructure around compliance in banking. But the true story is my in-laws have a cottage, a cabin on a lake up in very northern Wisconsin. But the lake is called Lake Namakagon, and it is in the Schwamigan National Forest, and the Schwamigan has a Q in it, if you can imagine. And so this cabin, this lake, is my favorite place in the world. Love spending my summers there. Very similar, I think, to your actual home. Just jumping off the dock, going for a swim, water skiing, all those sorts of things. But Namakagon nor Schwamigan are good names for a company. And the nearest town is Cable. So that's it. We're just named after a great little town in northern Wisconsin and one of my favorite places in the world.
Yeah, I would have thought about Namakagon a little bit more. I mean, that kind of has a ring to it. But,
yeah, you think? Yeah. How do you spell Namakagon? Because
I have no idea.
Even in Namakagon, there are two spellings. You
Does it
go
start
to
with
Namakagon.
an N or an M? I don't even know. Okay.
Well, there are literally we have mugs from Namakagon, and they have different spellings on, so it is insane. Yeah.
That is the wildest thing. Well, Cable is nice and easy to spell. You also are known for the pink color, the pink logos. You're going to see Tosh and her team running around at industry events with that very specific pink color, which I love on you guys. And full disclosure, we actually asked Tosh about the name at the FinTech meetup, so love that story.
Stacey, don't give away Steve's secrets.
Okay,
that was breaking news, Stacey.
Come on.
I'm asking the tough questions here. You're not Tosh. We're serious here.
Yeah.
Okay, Tosh, we're gonna cut that out. We'll ask someone about that. So let's
Hey,
get back to the hard-hitting news.
Now let's back up even farther. So, Tosh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like what qualifies you? Like, how did you get to start a company and like
Oh,
as a compliance expert? Like, I mean, I think you're amazing, but
good
what
cover.
should the world know about you?
But why the hell should I start a company? Yeah, honestly, no reason why I should have started a company. I do know a little bit about compliance and financial crime, so that's the good news. So my background, I have a law degree. I'm a chartered accountant. I worked in corporate finance for a number of years, and then I joined Monzo Bank in the UK when it was very small, very early on, not yet a bank. And I helped Monzo get a banking license in the UK, helped write the policies and procedures from the financial crime perspective, and led the team there for about 4.5 years. The team I led was responsible for building all of the financial crime controls at the bank. So we built all of the onboarding flows, KYC, KYB, sanction screening, PEP screening. We built transaction monitoring in-house, all the fraud detection. We even submitted SARs from within my team. And the team that I led, half of them were engineers and data scientists. And we spent millions a year bringing in vendors to help us build a really, really solid financial crime program, or anti-financial crime program, I should say. And so I had that background. And whilst I was there, we also had the experience of launching to business customers and also launching in the US with a sponsor bank. So we launched Monzo in the US while I was there with Sutton Bank. And so my background is very much in the anti-financial crime space, not the broader compliance space. But I had this really unique opportunity to bring a lot of first principles thinking, fresh ideas, because it was new to me. And I got to meld that with a bunch of industry expertise through some mentors I had at Cable, and got to sort of write the policies and procedures for a real bank, and got to think about building controls in a completely new way. There was no concept of we're a bank and therefore we use this standard technology that every other bank uses. It was, what do we do to make this the best customer experience,
Love it.
but to be compliant and to stop crime? And so being able to come at it with this really fresh mindset of never having worked in financial crime before and working alongside some of the most excellent engineers that I've ever met, gave me a unique opportunity to think in a really fresh way about financial crime and how to stop it, but also how to be compliant. And so it was with that background that I saw that whilst I had all of this technology and all of this opportunity to build stuff in the first line of defense, those controls, there was absolutely nothing in the second line or the third line to help banks understand if their controls were effective. So that was the unique experience I had, and I guess my the reason why I'm particularly well placed to have started a company in the initially in the anti-financial crime space. So we started off at Cable by testing controls across the Bank Secrecy Act and the money laundering regulations in the UK, and now we're expanding beyond financial crime. And I'm learning about these new frameworks as we go, and we've got some excellent people within Cable who have got the expertise to help us with that as well. But really, why should I be starting a company? No reason at all.
I love this story. You know what fascinates me the most, Tosh, is when I think of people in this space, most of us, and I'm going to say us because I would include myself in this category, we tend to run away towards anything too compliancy or regulatory, and I just made regulatory a verb there or an adjective, I'm not sure which, but most people don't embrace it. With your background, not even starting off in the financial crime space, I was wondering, like, what was it about that space that drew you to it? It seems like you ran towards compliance instead of like the rest of us that are running away from the burning building. You're running into it and you're like, I am going to make the world a better place and fix this. So what drove you? Was it just an interest?
It was a series of fortuitous events, I guess. So with one of the things that I realized very, very early on at Monzo, when I was asked to take care of the fraud that we were seeing and start to work in the financial crime space, was that it was this weird mix of the three things that I had done, which was just purely by chance. So I have a law degree, I'm a chartered accountant, and I had just spent 3 months learning to code at a coding boot camp. And
Wow.
financial crime within a bank is about law, about regulation. It is about money movement, accounting, and it is about using technology and understanding rules to be able to stop financial crime or to be able to ensure compliance. And the fact that I had done those three things and I had this realization, it was just by chance. It was completely fortuitous. I was in the right place at the right time. I was lucky enough to be part of Monzo really early on. I was lucky enough to be in the room when we had these new issues coming up, these new jobs that had to be done. And I was asked to deal with it. And it just so happened that I think I had the complete right background to be able to take it on. And from then on, I just found it absolutely fascinating. Financial crime specifically, because if you are working in a bank and you're investigating financial crime or suspected financial crime, you're basically just getting a chance to be really nosy, because you just get to look at a customer, their identity docs, are they legitimate? Look at their transactions, try to piece together this story of why they're spending money, where they're spending money. And maybe it's just because I'm nosy, but I found it absolutely fascinating to do all of this investigation. I think in another life I was a spy or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Sherlock Holmes of the banking space. I love it. And full disclosure, I will tell Steve, if we're walking along somewhere and just pedestrians walking along a street, if you have your garage door up, guess what? I'm going to look in it. Okay. I just listen, it's inviting me to look in. I'm not going to go actually up to it and poke around and see what you've got stored there. Maybe I will.
But you want to.
No, I won't. But
There's this fun game that you can play. I think it got popular during COVID as like a remote team building game, which was everyone has to go downstairs and take a photo of their fridge, and you can't tidy it up before you take the photo. It's just like, take a photo of your fridge, and then people had to guess whose fridge belonged to who, and what does that fridge tell everyone about you. And I think that's probably the same could be done with garages. What is in your garage? Is it organized? Do you have some shelves, or is it just chaos? Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, we had a neighbor during COVID that they left their garage door up all the time. And I think it's because they had these racks of toilet paper. So they were just bragging. It was very
he's not wrong. We'd go for walks around the neighborhood. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you've got all the toilet paper.
Set your alarm code tonight. No, just joking. I want everyone to know we are not advocates of committing crimes. So we're anti-crime. We're anti-crime here on this particular.
You did say earlier that you run away from compliance, so now I'm starting to question.
Listen, we're going to cut this out of the video as well. Just joking.
All right. Should we get back to compliance?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Regulatory issues, compliance.
The softer questions, the softer topics. Yeah. Do you want to start, Mrs. Bishop, or
no? Go, Mr. Bishop.
Oh, I was trying to segue there. So, Tosh, can you talk about so I think Stacy said it's not just for sponsor banks. What do you think? Whether, and you can take whichever angle you want, whether it's a sponsor bank or a traditional bank. What are the biggest challenges from a compliance standpoint that they're facing today?
I think they're actually different if you're talking about a sponsor bank or just a regular bank.
Let's cover both.
So for sponsor banks, I mean, the biggest compliance issue is they are no longer in control of that customer relationship. Mm-hmm. And as soon as there is an intermediary in between you and the customer who has, frankly, very, very different incentives to you, you're going to run into a difference of opinion with regards to how to interpret regulation, or how important the regulation is, or how to communicate if they maybe discover a lapse in compliance across one of those regulations. And so for sponsor banks, the biggest compliance challenge is making sure that they know, well, firstly, making sure that they are aligned with their fintechs on what the compliance requirements are, and then on making sure that they're followed every single time, and then on how to remediate what will inevitably be some compliance slip-ups, because they always happen. There is no bank in the world that does not have some compliance slip-ups at some point in time. So for those banks, it's really moving further away from that customer relationship, moving further away from those controls that are needed. You just lose visibility and oversight. And so that's the biggest issue they have. I think for banks that are not in the sponsor bank space, the biggest compliance hurdles that they have, there's the obvious one, which actually I don't think about as much as compliance, but more of just, anti-financial crime, which is fraud. Right? There is so much more fraud now, and with AI and the way that it's being used, there will be even more fraud. And so that is a challenge all of itself. I won't get too much into that because Cable is more on the compliance side rather than the fraud reduction side. On the compliance side for banks, what are their biggest challenges? Well, I think their biggest challenges are that margins are tight in banking, and the number of banks is reducing because of M&A, because of some bank failures. And so all banks are looking to find extra margin. They're looking to squeeze efficiencies out of their processes, out of their teams, to make sure that they can increase those margins and maximize those margins as much as possible. That inevitably means bringing in technology to replace people, to enable people to be even more efficient. Mm-hmm. And if you're bringing in technology, and if you are trying to give your team additional technology to make them more efficient, that requires integration, implementation, and knowing how to use that technology in the right way. And banks very, very often, especially the community banks that are most squeezed on margin, they don't have engineering teams. They don't have IT experts who can go across every single team at the bank, speak to every single person there, and make sure they know exactly how to use the tool, exactly how to optimize it, and to make sure that it's running correctly on an ongoing basis. And so as these banks add in automated onboarding, automated KYC, KYB, sanction screening, transaction monitoring, errors occur. And those errors occur at every stage of that process, at implementation, in the ongoing use of those SaaS products, how the people interact with those SaaS products, too much reliance on the products, not enough checking that you're doing the right next steps. Yes. And so at every single step of that process, there is a risk. There is a risk that a customer, a transaction, does not get screened in the right way, does not have the right risk assessment applied. The dispute falls through the cracks because you're tight on people and you don't know what this button means in your technology. And so I think the biggest compliance issue that the majority of banks in America have, recognizing that the majority of banks in America by number are, sub $10 billion banks, is the necessity to use technology without necessarily the best support structure within those banks, which will inevitably lead to compliance failures, which they need to identify before the regulators do.
You stated this so well. There was one piece that I reacted to because I've seen it over and over again in my own background growing up in fintech, selling financial crimes types of solutions, and working with those teams that specialized in that. And that was, at least what I took from it, Tosh, was that the technology itself doesn't make you compliant. Slapping in a system to fix a need doesn't just check the box for an organization. And I think that's sometimes more obvious to a compliance officer or risk team members, but individuals outside those groups, I'm not certain that they understand just how much goes into it. Because you have these banks that are making a decision. I think Steve and I overheard a conversation at lunch yesterday. There were community bankers determining from the financial crimes angle which of the vendors they were going to use. Were they going to go with Verifin? Were they going to go with a Jack Henry Yellowhammer or a new solution? Were they going to go with a BAM Plus type of solution? And many, many others. So they're implementing these solutions. I think sometimes bank executives and other departments think, oh, okay, well, we're spending X amount of dollars to slap in one of these named solutions. Compliance, check, move on. And it is absolutely not that simple. Those solutions take a great deal of setup. That setup, I have found, cannot remain static, meaning you have to adjust your parameters based upon how the risk changes and how your customer segments change. And then you have people that are in those solutions. To your earlier point, they have to be trained on those solutions. So there's just a lot of care and feeding that goes into a technology decision to ensure that it supports the ultimate outcome. That's what I took from your very brief sentence. Did I extrapolate out to the 20th degree successfully? Is that what you were saying?
I think you're absolutely right. It reminds me of when I was starting cable, I read every fine, every consent order that the UK, the US, the Australian, the Canadian regulators had given to every bank for like the last 20 years. And with each of those consent orders or fines, I was looking for what was the kind of root cause of those fines from the financial crime perspective. And I split it up between, and two of the main categories were the adequacy of financial crime controls and the effectiveness of the financial crime controls. And what we saw from a period of about 2010 through to about 2018, 2019 was that there was a large number of consent orders given for inadequate financial crime controls, i.e. the banks just didn't have the technology in place. So we saw every bank buying all of these solutions. They put those things in place. But then there was this change, and the consent orders and the fines started to mention ineffective financial crime controls, because both things have to be there. You have to have an adequate system and it has to be effective. And we went through this period of time where there were a lot more financial crime control providers building great systems, and they had to get those in place. And so banks started to get those in place. The number of fines requiring those systems reduced. But then the regulators started realizing that they were not effectively maintained, not effectively integrated into the bank. And so then we started seeing more fines that called out the ineffective nature of those systems. It's exactly what you're talking about. You have to have the system in place, but then you also have to do this ongoing effectiveness testing to make sure that it's actually working.
Precisely, which is what cable in essence does, at least ongoing testing, or which we can get into
effectiveness testing
later. Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
But before we move away from this, Steve, knowing Tosh just a little bit that I do, I would never have guessed that she reads consent orders, like going back 20 years, because you're such a fun person. But this is
what are you
this
saying? Consent orders are not fun?
Yeah.
Okay, I stand corrected. Let me go and just print off a stack, and I'll get back to you, Tosh. But I'm just really happy that there are people like you in this world that love reading consent orders.
Well,
is love too strong a word?
Yeah, maybe too strong a word. I studied law. I did not become a lawyer. So that's the difference.
I love it. I love it. Mr. Bishop, what do you think?
Yeah, I took something a little bit different from what she said.
Okay.
If we want to peel that onion back from the parking lot.
He's going to use all the phrases. Why don't we put a pin in that one?
The terrible cliches. Yeah, we're going to put a pin in that. So when you were talking about compliance challenges, and at first I was like, why the hell would a bank want to do BaaS if you have this more complexity, and like your customers are moved. And I was having a conversation earlier this week that like getting like executives at a bank to understand like you're not losing control over that customer, and like maintaining that through BaaS. And so like it was interesting, like at first like you're talking about how much harder it is, but then technology can help you gain control of that customer. And so you're helping mitigate the risk of having that third party that you're partnering with to handle that customer experience. So I mean that's absolutely, you have to enable that technology and set up right and monitor it and make sure it's set up accurately. But the good news is there are tools out there that you can use to really have a successful and compliant BaaS program.
Yeah,
true.
Agreed.
Yep, I would agree with that. I'm curious, Tosh, have you found instances where you walk into an organization, and you don't have to name any names, but you're just a little surprised that they don't have technology that automates X particular function? And what would that be? Is there a common one that you see where people are just doing things manually and you're thinking, oh my goodness, folks, there is a better way?
There are a good number of smaller banks who are not doing testing, even manually, that I think, on my reading of the regulation, makes them non-compliant just from in that regard.
That's right.
There isn't a common thread there that I can think of where a lot of banks I've spoken to don't have a particular control covered through that regulation. I definitely speak to people, to speak to banks, and a couple come to mind where they've been wanting to get into banking as a service, but then when we're talking about cable and talking about testing, they actually, it turns out, maybe don't even have appropriate controls for their own bank customers in place. And I think that they are not ready to enter the BaaS space. So that's happened on occasion for sure. But I think when you think about how many banks there are in America, and that saying, there are some banks in America that are too big to fail, and then there are some banks in America that are too small for the regulators to care. That is definitely true. There are so many banks. And there are banks that are very small, and the regulators don't pay them too much attention because if they were to fail, it doesn't matter at a federal level. And I think that's probably why we've got a handful of banks still in the country who could do with a little bit more maturity in their compliance program, and definitely should not be getting into BaaS.
Well stated. Maturity in their compliance program. That's very well stated, ma'am. Honey, I have a question, or do you have a question?
Who are you calling honey? Is that me or Steve?
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, both ways. Tosh, I feel like we're.
Tosh, do you have any questions
here.
for us?
I for sure. No. What made you get into business together?
Ooh, do you want to start?
It was just love at first sight. So there was nothing I didn't want to do with this woman. Like that was. Just...
Oh wow!
My goodness, I think we're definitely have to cut that out. I think she's speaking specifically of amBaaSsador.
I am, but I love your answer, Steve. That was very romantic.
It's something that ever since we've been married, when we got married, I was at a bank and Stacy was at Jack Henry, and then I left the bank, went to Jack Henry, and then I left Jack Henry, went to the bank, and so you see a very common theme over the course of definitely our married relationship, and actually most of our dating relationship, of technology and banking. And so as I was building out a BaaS program, and that was something we talked about on a very frequent basis, as you talk about banking and BaaS, and Stacy's working for fintechs now, and it just was a natural evolution that this became a part of the industry that we're very passionate about. And we wanted to make sure that community banks especially, and those FIs that are smaller, have the opportunity to learn about it and know how to take it to market and do it in a compliant manner. And who better to do that with than the person that I talk to most and spend the most time with.
Oh, well, that's so nice. I wasn't sure where he was going to go, because I could see this spinning off into a variety of different directions, Todd. I truly do.
I didn't know where I was going either, so I mean,
you just let it happen. I was believing what you were saying. But can I just bounce back for a second, because you mentioned I had been at Jack Henry, and I was at Jack Henry for a long time, 23 years. And when Steve decided to explore banking as a service, it was a term I had heard mentioned, but growing up inside banking and even inside a big logo, it wasn't obvious to me. I wasn't educated on it. So to Steve's point, I followed along on this journey with him and was learning everything alongside of him, because like he said, it's not like we can run away from each other. We are in it. We have these three human beings. We talk all the time about banking. They talk all the time about banking and embedded banking now as a result, and fintechs. So it was fascinating to me to learn with him, Tosh, but it was also confronting for me to realize, holy crap, I have been in this space how long, and I did not know about it. I was confusing even open banking with embedded banking. I sort of thought those terms were synonyms, and I learned quickly that was not the case. And I will tell you, it very much is a passion for us. If you can't tell, we both have this long-standing banking relationship in these networks of people, and we got to exercise that a little bit earlier this week at a regional user group meeting for Jack Henry. So going and seeing and speaking with bankers and former colleagues, and it was so refreshing to be able to teach them about something that they were curious about, but in some cases a little embarrassed to ask about because they felt like they should know about it, or they were actually confusing embedded banking with some other terms as well. So meeting people where they are, like literally meeting them where they are, these grassroots efforts, and sharing what we have learned, it has been amazing. And doing it with someone that, I love and respect is fantastic. So from my point of view, that's the longest answer to a question ever.
So I have
can
another
keep
question,
going.
if I may,
Please.
which is with this passion and with your background, what do you hope for Bass? What do you see as the kind of golden end state?
The success factor, is that what you're asking? There's a dog barking in my
We can hear it,
yeah, can you hear it? Sorry about that, you guys. But what does
He wants to be in
success look
business
like?
too. He's protesting because we would not let him be a part.
It just didn't have the qualifications. He didn't pass a background check. Yeah, no. But for me, like, what does good look like? What does success look like for amBaaSsador?
Well, not just like what does good look like, but so talking about banking as a service as an industry.
Oh.
What do you hope that is in 10 years time?
I may have a different answer than Steve, but I'm going to take this ladies first approach. So, honey, you can ponder your response. For me, I'm a person that I do enjoy everyone getting a fair shot. Big, small, different types of institutions, different chartered institutions. For me, a dream scenario would be everyone, and this is a grandiose vision, but everyone at least has a cursory knowledge of banking as a service and has made a very educated decision on yes, no for their organization. For me, I think Steve and I may be aligned on this one. I'll let him correct me if we're not, but he and I both feel strongly that the industry will look very different in 10 years' time. And we see so many fintechs spinning up here in the US every year. We see new market entrants coming in from other countries. I have at least 3 discussions a week with fintech founders wanting to bring their tech into the US and are looking to speak to bankers and need sponsor banks and need help selling and things like that. So from my point of view, very long-winded answer of saying, I think things are going to be different in 10 years, and I don't think banks will be able to rely entirely on a traditional banking model. And if they don't use banking as a service to diversify and compete differently, they're going to have to choose some other niche. And Steve and I were kind of chatting about this earlier today as well. I don't think it's sustainable in the long run for banks to continue to play the rate game and just compete on rates and continue to struggle for customer acquisition and deposit growth in the traditional formats. And guess what? They don't have to. They don't have to. If it's not BaaS, which lets them answer a lot of questions, they can find something else. So in a nutshell, I would love every bank to at least know about it. I would love every bank to be able to say yes or no. I would love to see more bank sponsors to offset this very big demand and supply just misalignment we have right now, and perhaps even a more competitive economic picture for these fintechs that need BaaS services because there's more suppliers. Mr. Bishop, on to you.
I agree with everything you said, as always. My guiding principle. I think for me, success in BaaS, there are a few scenarios that could play out. The big banks could all be the ones that dominate it, and then community banks don't have that business line and they struggle, and you're going to see very few, if any, community banks. That's not a scenario I want. You could see mass fintechs like in programs where I won't name the bank, but it rhymes with Schmalmalv. They had so many programs that they couldn't manage them and make sure they were compliant. So if community banks, the future success would be community banks take on a manageable amount of programs and have BaaS as a part of their business. Do banks have to do BaaS? No, I think they can find a niche market. But as you look at where the industry is going, it's not going to be the majority of financial transactions are not going to take place in a branch. They're going to take place in non-traditional ways, whether that is an app, whether it's agentic AI, whatever that is. And so to do that, to enable that, like I want to see BaaS in many community banks having a small, like spread out across the sponsor banks, so that we have still have that like community banking system. And then the traditional brick and mortar community still gets served from that broader community that is doing the new fintech BaaS stuff.
Yeah, Tosh, I've got a question for you. Something Steve and I were chatting about earlier today that I think we have different opinions on. Maybe mine's unfounded, but I'd love to hear yours. Will there ever be a time in which compliance in the broad scope can be outsourced to a group specializing, like compliance officer team, compliance as a service for banks?
I think we already see quite a lot of outsourcing in compliance, particularly at the larger banks. Like, well, a lot of big banks have large teams outsourced and offshore to actually perform a lot of the reviews. I think a lot of that might be replaced by AI.
Okay.
But we do see that. We see a lot of smaller banks using, I don't know, fractional CCOs or using their trusted advisors, their consulting firms who they work with very closely to help them stand up new new products or launch new products. So I think we do see a lot of that already. Okay. But when I was talking last night with some people about what is a bank, what does it mean to be a bank? Because in this world where embedded banking or banking as a service continues to exist, which I think we all think it will, what actually does it mean to be a bank? And I think there is an argument to be made that a bank is a legal entity that has a banking license and that has compliance requirements. And so like, very much from my point of view and how I think about banking is compliance. From the very first moment that you try to even get a customer, before you even onboard a customer, try to get a customer, there are compliance requirements. And every single interaction you have with them, every single time you market to them, every single time you move money for them or provide them with a loan, all the way through to they want to offboard and exit your bank, it's compliance. And so can you separate compliance completely from that banking license, from what it really means to be a bank? Like, no, I don't think you can. Can you outsource some of the operational work involved with compliance? For sure. And I think that's been done for many, many years now. And as I say, I think a lot of that might be able to be replaced by AI. But no, fundamentally, I think banking is compliance. And so it will never be able to be completely separated from the banking license.
Okay. And maybe that's the way we should settle it, Steve, because I think you were more in the camp.
I'm happy to settle any marital disputes here.
I mean, it was a very political answer from Tosh. Like, she did not take a firm stance either way, if we want to be honest.
What are your stances? What's the controversy here?
I was more in line with you, where I said I think these aspects can be outsourced to organizations or to individuals perhaps in the future that are absolute specialists in these types of services and have that done. Steve came at it more from the angle of it. I was more aligned with you because I think a bank has to own compliance and they can't outsource it completely. So
yes.
So you're saying that Tosh told us we were both right?
Absolutely. She weaved it right.
Sounds right.
She split it up right. It was well done. Well done, Matt.
Oh my goodness. Well, I want to be cognizant of Tasha's time here. Mr. Bishop, any questions before we chat with Tasha a little bit about some exciting things happening at Cable and where to find these fine folks?
No, let's jump right there. Let's go for
Okay.
it.
I want to talk about something that also doesn't seem very sexy, but actually is. And I will give you all the credit for this because it is. And this is the new announcement that you guys made. Was it last week? Just last week?
This
Or was
week.
it this week? This week, the announcement that while cable may have began here in the States as far as like banking as a service and FinCEN, financial crimes related testing automation, and not just the sampling, but across the entire segment of a bank's offering across every different type of required documentation and review, you have now expanded into some favorite letters of banks. Would you like to talk about the regulatory alphabet that you guys are now catering to with your solution?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So we started out life as automating the testing for financial crime controls. And this week we announced that we are no longer just testing controls in the financial crime space, but now have launched frameworks to help test controls across regs E, B, and Z. So reg E focused on disputes and regs B and Z focused on lending. And so the goal here is that a bank has a whole series of regulations it has to comply with, and we will be able to help you test 100% of your accounts and transactions and disputes and complaints and whatever it might be on an ongoing basis in real time, and just tell you where you're not compliant. So now we do BSA, we also do regs B, E, and Z, and there'll be more to come. So if you are a bank and you have compliance requirements, which as we just realized is every bank, then you basically need cable.
Absolutely. And that's what I've taken away from this discussion. It's precisely because what's the alternative, folks? For anyone out there listening, the alternative is you're taking a look at a small sampling, and hoping it's the same sample that your examiners come in and also take a look at, right? Which sometimes
exactly.
maybe that happens, sometimes not, but it's regardless a very, very manual process. Josh, something I haven't asked you, and I need to close the loop on this before I let you go, and that is, how do you envision cable being used internally at the bank beyond, like once the testing is performed and artifacts or knowledge is produced? Do you anticipate, or have you seen adopters of the solution take cable into meetings, like leadership meetings or other types of meetings where they will review, hey, here's where we are not compliant, here's why, and now we need to modify our policy around this in order to ensure that it doesn't happen again? Have you started seeing any banks executing those types of, oh, now we have cable, now we have this data, here's the next step? Have you started seeing any of that, or have any insight there?
So we have reporting functionalities and capabilities within cable, and so we know that reports from our product and the data from our product is used at executive meetings and at board meetings. We know that auditors have used the product. We know that examiners have been shown around the product and provided pretty positive feedback about it. Nice. We also have I think it is the only automatically updating risk assessment on the market as well. So we know that our risk assessments are used for all of our customers' bank exams as well. So where our customers use our automated testing and our risk assessment, the risk assessments automatically update based on the true efficacy of their controls across all of their customers. And so they have this real-time updating risk assessment, a truly living risk assessment that represents the risk in the bank at that very time. And we also have the ability to incorporate their fintech partners or their third parties' risk assessments into the bank's risk assessment. So we know that our risk assessments are also used at the bank level, at their board and executive meetings, but also at the exams as well.
That is fantastic. Folks, if you haven't already looked up Tasha's name or cable, you can do so. Tosh, the website is cable.tech.
That is correct.
All right, cable.tech, not cable.wisconsin. Cable.tech. is the name. And anything else that people should look at? They can reach out directly to you on LinkedIn. I know
Always.
you're active out there.
Yep,
Any
or
other
just at
places
Natasha at cable.tech. But yeah, otherwise it was good to chat about banking as a service with you both, Mr. and Mrs. Bishop. Thank you very much for having me.
Always
Thank you.
fantastic to see you. Thank you so much, Tosh.